boys and girls. Welcome back to Children's Church Online. Today we're going to learn that God is forgiving when we do wrong things. If we are sorry and we tell God, He stays friends with us. Today we'll read in the Bible about a man named Peter who was outside in the dark of night and he made a wrong choice, but God still forgave him. We'll also find out more about how God forgives us. So to start today's lesson, I want you to notice that I have a big wooden cross next to me. So make sure you're seated so that you can see the wooden cross. You're also going to need a little bit of space. So look around you, and if you need to move some things out of your way, you're going to need to be able to move around a little bit to participate with me. Okay? Today, we're learning that God is forgiving. Jesus died on a cross to take the punishment for our wrongs so God could forgive us. But even while Jesus was on trial to be killed, one of Jesus' friends did something really, really hurtful. This story today comes from the book of Luke, and I'm going to read chapter 22, verses 55 through 57. And this is what it says. But when they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and had sat down together, Peter sat down with them. A servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight. She looked closely at him and said, "This man was with him." But Peter denied it. "Woman, I don't know him," he said. So right now, I want you to turn around so that you're facing away from your television screen or your computer screen. The reason I'm having you turn away is because you're going to, just like Peter did, turn away from the cross, turn away from Jesus. Now that you're turned around, I want you to take one big step forward. So you're walking away from Jesus. Peter was one of Jesus' best friends, but he pretended he didn't even know him. Peter turned his back on Jesus. Think about a time where you might have been embarrassed to be a Christian. Maybe you didn't pray before school lunch because you thought people would laugh at you. In our story, after Peter denied knowing Jesus, he did it again. Listen to the next verse of our story. A little later, someone else saw him and said, "You also are one of them." "I am not," Peter replied. So this time I want you to take another giant step away from the cross. Think about a time you knew what Jesus would want you to do, but you didn't do it. Maybe you had a favorite toy or snack and you chose not to share. In our story, Peter didn't stop there either. Listen to what happened next. About an hour later, another asserted, "Certainly this fellow was with him." Peter replied, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. Peter loved Jesus. In fact, all of Jesus' other friends ran away as soon as he was arrested. But Peter stuck around, determined to be a faithful friend. But in the end, he let fear take over and said he didn't know Jesus. Jesus knew that Peter would do that. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him. "Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times." And he went outside and wept bitterly. Think about the moment Jesus looked at Peter. What do you think that felt like for Jesus? What do you think it felt like for Peter? Imagine saying mean things about your closest friend, only to realize that your friend overheard everything you said. That's kind of like what happened to Peter and Jesus. But God is forgiving. Jesus died on the cross to forgive our sins and Peter's. And after Jesus came back to life, he did something special with Peter. We're now going to jump over to the book of John, verse 15. Chapter 21, verse 15. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you truly love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said, "you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." So now I want you to turn back around, facing me, facing the cross, and I want you to take a giant step forward towards the cross. The next verse says, "Again, Jesus said, 'Simon, son of John, do you truly love me?' And he answered, 'Yes, Lord, you know that I love you.' Jesus said, 'Take care of my sheep.'" So again, I want you to take another giant step towards the cross. The third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." So I want you to take one more giant step towards the cross, and hopefully you're now back up to the television or your computer screen or whatever device you're watching this on. We just undid all our steps away from the cross. How did Jesus' interaction with Peter undo what Peter had done wrong? In life, there's no undo option like on our computer. But God is forgiving. And when he forgives us, it's kind of like he hits an undo button in what we did to mess up our friendship with him. He acts like we never did anything wrong. Peter got a chance to say that he loved Jesus 3 times, the same number of times he denied knowing Jesus. It was kind of like undoing all 3 of the times he said he didn't know Jesus. God is forgiving. No matter what we've done wrong, he'll give us a fresh start, just like he did for Peter. Listen to this. I'm now going to skip over to 1 John chapter 1, verse 9. "If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just and will forgive us our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness." God is forgiving. Every time we tell him we're sorry, he'll clean up our hearts. So, the next thing we're going to do today is make a little simple craft that will help us to remember that God is forgiving. Okay, so today we're going to make a very simple little object that will help you to remember that God forgives us. In order to make one, you will need a clear sandwich bag, pretty much any size, but best if it doesn't have one of those white label things on it. You can see mine's just a clear one without that. And then you have some choices about what you would want to put inside. You could use hair gel, you could use hand sanitizer, but myself, what I chose to use was some finger paint. I chose finger paint because it's already colored, real pretty colors, and it has the same sort of texture that we need in order to do this little craft. If you choose to use hand sanitizer or hair gel, you could choose to put a couple drops of food coloring in that just so you can make a pretty color too, because you don't want it to be clear. So you can see I made a sample one here. That's just the sandwich bag filled with my finger paints. I chose these colors because they kind of reminded me of fall now that we are in October and it's fall. So let's talk about what we're going to do. Take your sandwich bag and with whatever you're choosing to put in it, again, this is just some finger paint. So I'm going to dump a chunk in there. Like I said, I chose 2 colors to mix just to make it a little fancy. You can certainly do it all in one color if you like. Yellow happens to be my favorite color. I'm going to dump a little bit of the yellow in there too. There we go. Because I like that when I put these 2 colors together, try to squeeze out as much air as you can. You won't probably be able to get it perfect, and that's okay. And now you can see what this one looked like when it started and how the colors just kind of mixed together. And what you're wanting to do is to cover the entire bag with whatever gooey fun stuff you chose to put in your bag. And then you'll be ready to do the activity. Okay, so it'll look something like that. We all make wrong choices. You could talk about some of the bad choices that we make. Sometimes we tell a lie. Sometimes we hurt others or take things that aren't ours. So when we do that, it makes people feel sad. So on my bag here, you can make a sad face. Not sure how well you're able to see this. Make one on this. See if I can make another one over here. So when we do things, I feel like that one's not showing up as well as this one is. So when we do things that hurt people and we make bad choices, it makes people feel sad inside. But today we learned that God is forgiving. That means He erases our wrong choices from His mind instead of being angry with us. Let's make something to help us remember that what God does with our wrong choices. So with our bags, if you just take your hand and wipe it across, you can see when God forgives us that it erases the sad face and all disappears. And then you can change it into a happy face if you want. So it's just a fun little thing that you can keep playing with, and you can draw whatever you want. You could draw stars. Really, you can do anything. It feels really fun to play with. And then whatever you do, you can just erase it all and do it again. I actually think it worked better when I had a plain piece of white paper underneath it. I didn't realize till I just sat here that it's harder to see with I have a brown table here that I'm working with, but if you want to do this and you want to be able to see the picture that you're drawing a little bit better, it might be helpful to put a piece of white paper underneath whatever it is that you're drawing on. We all make wrong choices, and that makes God sad. Keep tracing and erasing your art, and remember that God is forgiving. He sent Jesus to take away all our wrong choices. He loves us and always wants to be our friend. Today we're learning that God is forgiving. We've all done bad things. As you watch this video, think about which things in the video are things that you've done wrong.
Have you ever done something and felt really, really guilty about it? Well, good news! God is forgiving. Maybe you've disobeyed your parents. You knew the right thing to do was to listen to them, but you didn't. The good news is, if we confess our sins to God, He is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all wickedness. 1 John chapter 1, verse 9. Maybe you told a lie. You know lying is wrong. But the good news. Oh Lord, you are so good, so ready to forgive, so full of unfailing love for all who ask for your help. Psalm chapter 86, verse 5. Maybe you acted out of anger. The good news? Remember The Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. Colossians chapter 3, verse 13. Maybe you cheated on a test or at a game. The good news? God has removed our sins as far from us as the east is from the west. Psalm chapter 103, verse 12. Maybe you've done something so bad you think God would never forgive you, but your past choices don't define you. Because the good news, anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old life is gone, a new life has begun. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17.
Which things in the video were things that you have done? Don't tell me. Just talk to God silently about that. Today we're learning that God is forgiving, and we heard how Jesus showed God's forgiveness by forgiving his friend Peter. It must have helped Peter's heart feel so much better to know that Jesus forgave him and still wanted to be his friend. How do you feel when you do something wrong? Does it make you feel sad? Maybe sometimes you want to cry. Or maybe you feel like you've just lost a friend. God forgives us too when we do wrong. It might feel like our hearts are broken. Let's do something to help us think about that. I brought with me today some Play-Doh. And I bet many of you have Play-Doh or modeling clay or something like that at your house. I don't even need the full container, but just a small chunk for what I'm going to show you. I chose red because of what we're doing today. Isn't Play-Doh so satisfying to play with? I find it to be satisfying to play with. So I want you to take this and I want you to smash it down to make it flat. You can do it on the table that you have there at your house. And then I'm going to take a heart cookie cutter to cut out a heart shape from the Play-Doh. I bet many of you have done Play-Doh with cookie cutters before. And there's my perfect little heart, right? These hearts, well, this heart is in good shape, right? It's near perfect. It's a whole heart, it's a happy heart. But when we do something wrong, our hearts don't feel so great. It might feel like our heart gets broken, right? We might try to make our hearts feel better. We might try to put them back together. So if I try here to smush this, I mean, sort of, right? But it's certainly far from perfect the way it had once been. Our hearts get messy when we do wrong. We feel sad, or sometimes maybe we feel like we want to hide, and we can't fix our hearts all on our own. Just like I couldn't put this dough back together the way it was when I had first made it with the cookie cutter. It's close, but you can still see where I smushed it all together, and it's definitely not back to the nice, perfect heart shape that it was in the beginning. When we ask God to forgive us, something awesome happens to our hearts. So I'm going to take my original piece of Play-Doh and mush it back together, starting over with fresh dough, and see if we can make it new again. Flatten it out, smush it out, make it nice and flat, and then take my cutter and cut it out. This reminds me of making cookies at Christmas time. Here we go. Ta-da! Starting over with a fresh dough heart made it new. like your heart had never been torn apart. God is forgiving. So when we do wrong, we can ask God to forgive us. God will always forgive us. God's forgiveness gives our hearts a new start, and we learn we can do things differently the next time, so our hearts don't end up in the same mess again. Thank you for joining me today for Children's Church. I hope to see you again next week. Bye-bye.